Hey there, guys. We're Between Two Teeth. I'm Bobby. This is Stephy Steph.
Shout out.
Yo! Today we are talking about one of the articles that you wrote on LinkedIn. It's going to be on our website once we finally do actually get a website. It was entitled Big Dreams or Big Fears. You talked about fears. Yikes. I want to get right. Well, why'd you do an article about fear?
Because fear is tied to big fears are tied to big dreams. And sometimes an exercise that I do is I'm like, okay, what are my biggest goals right now? What are my goals in the next 5 years, 10 years? And then I write down what's the biggest fear holding them back? Like, why am I not doing that right now?
And I would definitely say most people have a lot of, they struggle with fear for sure. Let's get right in. You listed 4 of them. I want you to go through these item by item if you can. Number 1, losing my parents/family.
Right. So with COVID, a lot of changes happened in my family. I come from a big family and we stopped getting together as frequently. The larger your family gets, it kind of gets tough when everyone starts having kiddos. And on the other side, my mom had cancer and she went through some healthcare problems with Guillain-Barré's. She couldn't walk for a time there. And then it also came with some memory issues. And so for the first time, I'm like, oh my gosh, I could lose my parents. And it's scary.
COVID was terrifying. I had it early on. And I think, before vaccines and all that kind of stuff. And I went to bed thinking, hey, this may be it.
And, it goes deeper than that. Ever since I went away to college, I was a different kiddo. My biggest fear.
I've seen videos of you. Yes.
Well, so my biggest fear is losing my parents. And when you ask yourself, well, why is that a fear? I mean, other than a normal kiddo, it's because I look to them for my worth.
Okay. A lot to unpack there. That's maybe a different episode. And I understand that. Having me, I have one parent with severe dementia now, and I have another one who I did lose. And it taught me, and I know you and I had just talked about this, I think yesterday, I left nothing unsaid with either parent. And if you're in a situation where, for a variety of reasons, things are unsaid, fix it. I'm a pusher. I push people. Go fix it.
And you mentioned fixing it. It's not that simple.
It's not that simple,
especially
but at least you try.
Right. No, of course you try. But also give yourself some grace. It is not that simple.
Give yourself and give other people. Sorry, I had to interrupt.
You're trying to figure somebody else out. You're trying to figure yourself out. Your parents may not have unpacked their own issues at the age of 50.
Yeah,
or
you're not
60.
Wrong. You're not wrong. Number 2. It was a terrible segue, but I just, that's what I do.
We're tired of talking about your biggest fear.
Well,
Keep going.
But it is tricky. And that's the blessing of a lifetime is that you get a chance to unpack that. But at the same time, every day is a blessing. And you never know what that next day is going to bring. Number 2, losing a lot of money.
One of the biggest reasons I have not gone into big entrepreneurial ventures is I'm scared of losing a lot of money and getting
says
taken
the
advantage
woman
of.
who was an early adopter of crypto and has like a
that's
hard
different.
wallet or
no, it was
metal wallet.
It was cold and hot storage.
Cold and hot storage. Yeah. You were obsessed about that for the longest time. But go on.
That's not a lot of money. I'm worried about making big investments that that wipe me out. That's what I'm worried about.
Now, is that reasonable?
It is because I know me. I'm a risk taker.
Yeah, okay.
And so the fear is not that unfounded. I'm worried about waking up one day and going, you know what? F it. Let's do it.
Wow.
So I'm reading an entrepreneurial book right now, and it talks about the founder of McDonald's has a quote that says something like, I'm going to misquote him, something like, if you don't go all, or if you don't want to take risks, get out of business.
And would you like some fries with that?
I don't think he ever worked in the back.
If you don't like taking risk,
get out of business.
Get out of business. Now, yes, and to your point, your fear was losing a lot of money. That's what you wrote in the article. And then you said here that you were afraid of being wiped out. Then you put appropriate controls in place, and then you don't bet the farm on the whole deal.
When I bought my Jeep, for instance, I didn't sleep that night. Or
You
when
didn't
I
sleep
when
that
I bought
night.
my first house, I didn't sleep.
You bought a used Jeep that was in very good
Lightly
condition,
used.
lightly used, which,
But it was also during the height of the
if you've seen
pandemic.
Steph drive.
We could ticky tack about money. One of my fears is losing a lot of money because I'm not scared to put a lot of money down.
Well, and so where are you going? You going somewhere? Oh, if this is a podcast, they can't see that you're moving around. Oh,
What's the next one?
are we done with that one? So I want to just say the last thing, you know, you look at things and say, well, what's the realistic risk here? I know you and I are talking about doing some specific things with between two teeth, some spokes of the wheel. And we looked at it and said, it's kind of a low risk of losing on this deal, doing this or this or this. And so putting things in perspective, I think, is good. Number 3, being stuck forever. Wow, that's a powerful one. Go.
That's a complicated line item. Being stuck meaning you're just stuck. You're not. It kind of ties in the last one too, but you're never reaching your potential, and you never did that big thing that you really wanted to do because you were too scared, or something came up, or you didn't have enough time, or you just didn't do it. You just got stuck, and you didn't have courage to take the appropriate risks when you needed to take them. And instead of facing fears, you let things just kind of back up.
What would you be fearful of as an example?
Oh, you know, I think that's just in general. I look at
Are you afraid of people thinking you're not smart? Or are you thinking of like you're fearful of rejection if you try to do something?
I think more along the lines of I'm a seeker.
You are a seeker and you're open to change.
I'm probably too open to
You're probably
change.
too open to change and too much of a seeker. You're looking everywhere. You're seeking
Right.
everything.
I think a seeker is more, their real fear is fear of being bored.
Mm. And you know, I had a conversation with someone several weeks ago, and they appreciate stability. They don't want to seek, they don't want to change, they want status quo. And you're a person that seeks and wants to improve probably more than anyone I've ever seen in my entire life. And I've seen a lot of people, and you do it really, really well. However, it puts you in a tricky spot because you're opening yourself up to rejection of others. You're opening yourself up to people looking at you going, oh my gosh, now she's doing this or this or this.
There's a proverb out there that says the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The
Yes.
second best time is today.
Yep.
And so when I identify something that I feel like is an opportunity for change, either within myself or my lens or way of thinking or being, I try for the most part not to put that off. My parents, for example, and some of my family members
Remember,
are
there are subscribers.
they put things off.
Mm,
My mom has put things off her entire life, and it's the emotional growth there, and it's getting over old
yeah.
wounds, because that's the tough part. I had a conversation with someone a couple days ago about 15-minute conversations can change years of someone's life, and most people don't want to have that awkward 15-minute conversation that they really need to have with somebody else, because they just, one, they don't have to. That's the day and age we live in, with ample opportunity for new friends and new faces. What happens is, though, if you have a miscommunication with somebody, you're not going to have, for me, I have miscommunications with my family all the time.
It takes one person to start that difficult
It
conversation.
does. And the thing is, if you let it fester and you
Yeah.
don't have that real short interaction, man, it is just a wild spinoff. And I don't know if guys have this problem as much as women do, but I know for, based on my
Oh, I think
experiences, it's just tough.
everybody has these experiences. The last one that you listed, number 4, and this resonates an awful lot with me. Never being enough. Why is that a fear of yours? Because people look at you and they go, by golly, look at her. She's, doing this and
She's
this and
crazy.
this. Well, they do say that too.
So it was really cool. The coolest thing about this Harvard leadership program that I did last year was being in a room full of people who shared this fear with me of never being enough. And I, looking around, I was giving our class speech at the end of this, and when I was addressing the class, I addressed them
As valedictorian.
as my fellow seekers. I was not valedictorian.
That's right, you did.
And the cool thing is that was the first time I've been in a room with so many, I'm going to go ahead and call them neurodivergent, but brilliant minded people who they've struggled with relationships and they've struggled with the art of human nature because they have been driven since they were a little kiddo, and they're constantly seeking the next thing. Their minds can't get enough of this next thing. So you have these brilliant surgeons that are just so encapsulated in their careers, and they struggle with human nature.
Yeah, that's really tricky.
But they all don't feel like enough, and they've accomplished far more than I have.
And I struggle with that kind of constantly, and I have to.
So what's the antidote?
Well, for me, what works for me is changing my negative self-talk and saying, you know what? You're enough. You've done enough stuff. And I don't want to do things like degrees or whatever just to try to prove myself.
I think part of the trick, and I was talking to my cousin this morning about this very same thing. His daughter is brilliant at jujitsu. And
she's brilliant.
She's brilliant at it. And I said, I wish growing up I had known how to tease apart this very complicated motivating factor of feeling like I wasn't enough, separating that from my worth as a person. And my fear here, the reason I listed it is because I think part of seeking and being a seeker is tied to this feeling of not enough. So if I feel enough one day, my fear is that I'll never seek again and I'll never try to keep going. I feel like my self-worth, unfortunately, is wrapped up in my ability to strive and continue to grow and develop. And I think that's a fallacy.
There's a risk and a cost to that. As I hear you talk, the risk is that you'd never be satisfied.
If I really
and there's
felt
a blessing
like I was
that.
Enough. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a blessing. I think if you,
or no, I'm sorry. The risk is that you would feel satisfied and therefore never seek anything further.
Yeah.
And that's a fear of mine. Cause what if I'm not seeking? What if I'm not achieving?
Then
what?
on our Italy motorcycle adventure, I was trying to be a stoic, and up in the Italian Alps, you did help me realize that I'll never be a stoic.
I think you just have to have a philosophical change of course, dramatic change of course.
True. And I can be a little bit stoic, but the Stoics would say be present and, sort of let the universe unfold. Of course, I never found the letters from whoever that was, so I don't know the exact verbatim. But living in the present, having that balance of I want to strive, I want to seek, I want to learn all these things about the universe.
Yeah, and the coolest thing for me was,
but I want to be present today.
When writing this article, speaking about being present, was just that if you're trying to be present, living in the moment, and when you start to really think about goals, I didn't realize fears and goals were so tight at the hip. But if you have a dream or a vision or a goal, it probably has a fear that comes alongside of it if you really think about it. Because whenever I list out my goals, what I've started to do is list out the fear, list out my biggest obstacle and barrier to why I'm probably not going to pursue that, or I haven't pursued it yet. And that helps me kind of take down the first obstacle.
And I think as I put on my MBA hat from what I learned through that process, you would look at it and say, is this a reasonable fear or not? And what is, what's the chance of this happening? What's the worst thing that can happen if that fear is realized? There is some sort of,
Yeah.
I think it's a stoic saying. Once again, I'm a terrible stoic. I'm putting that out there. But it's something like, we worry so much about these fears that never actualize. They never actually happen.
And that's a great point. And so when you start to think about, what is it? It's kind of like your emotional awareness versus facts. So if something happens, what you really need to do is tease apart what's in your head, what's the movie that you're playing in your head versus what are the facts. So if you think Sally is really mad at me, why is Sally really mad at me? Well, did Sally say anything to you? No. Well, why do you think she's mad at you? And maybe it was a look, but maybe what you don't know is that this person had a terrible
Sally's
day.
having a rough
Yeah,
day.
she had a rough day. She just had a patient yell at her, or she just had a client that canceled on her. You don't know. And so, what I try to push some of my mentees is to rationalize their thinking and to really look at the evidence. I think, personally, I tend to be a catastrophic thinker, and
personally, I always assume the other person is the problem.
which
And
is which is actually a really nice spot to be in.
It's a self-preservation thing. It's lovely, but I always assume
it's a love language.
I'm like, oh, they must be having a tough day. Okay, off I go. La 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 la.
I'd love to talk about my experience in New York City.
Oh yeah,
where
that's right.
I was able to work with some artists.
Talking about fear, you worked with some artists.
It was super cool. One of the things we asked,
there's a bit of an issue there too.
There was a bit of an issue. We asked I was asking the artist the question that we normally ask.
You did some modeling there too. We'll just put that out there.
Some light modeling.
I've done some hand modeling
scared to death
in the past.
I don't think you have.
Yeah, I don't think I have either, but I'd love to. Go on.
So I asked these artists a question we normally ask our patients, which is, what would you do if you knew you weren't going to fail?
Oh, I love that question.
And if you ask an artist this, what I found was they laugh. They were like, what are you talking about? They tie art to failure. They're like, we fail every time we have a creative work, because the creative process is a, continuation of ideas and bad ideas and good ideas and spitballing and trying to figure out what's going to stick. And it's also highly subjective. And so it was kind of fun hearing their response. They almost rejected the question. And it's so different from if you ask more of a biology major the question. And they're like, oh man, I probably would go sing, or I'd go dance, something fearless.
Except that during many experiments, the failure becomes an outcome that changes the needle on something. There's a plethora of examples in science that in fact is the case. That's a good way of looking at it. I bring on failure. I don't know. I fail a lot. And I try to put fear in its place as best I can, but sometimes that's tricky. So, well, I'm glad you had those experiences. You are very creative.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
One of the things, as we speak of fears, one of my fears when I went to this funny story, I guess, is that we were doing some modeling for this for this specific event, and when I got in there, I didn't realize that there was. I knew there was going to be outfits that they were going to kind of, dress us up, kind of like a Barbie doll, and what I didn't realize was that you you required the correct undergarments in order to partake in this, and so. Being the athlete that I am, I didn't,
They had to make you some custom undergarments.
Usually I try to be as efficient.
You're a minimalist.
Minimalist as possible. And so it's really tough for a female to be in a room full of these beautiful women and all of these clothes. And you have these models and these seamstresses going, wow, she doesn't have any underwear.
Yeah. And
And the funny thing is, oh, sorry, go
well,
for it.
kudos to you for handling it so well.
Yeah, so
And it actually, I think,
inside,
cracked everybody up.
right, inside I was cringing. I wanted to be buried under the jail, please, and just bury my head in the sand. But outside, my conscious brain told me the way you make an embarrassing situation better is to wholeheartedly embrace it and be the loudest voice in the room. And so I just was like, "Oh my god, that is awesome. We do things different in Texas and I cannot wait. I hope we are able to make some underwear for me today because that will be the first custom made designer
You you
underwear.
you
Victoria's
brought
Secret's got nothing
you
on you
brought those
guys."
home. Those, that's hilarious.
And
But
the funniest part is, so they make this and the material they have doesn't stretch.
yeah.
So they're holding up what seems to be a ginormous pair of underwear and it doesn't fit. So not only you got to go through that process once, they're like, it doesn't fit her. We got to make some that are bigger.
Well,
And if you're a female, you're just cringing at this point.
kudos on you for that.
So I got two pair made.
And once again, hearing you talk about how all of that threw down and you took a difficult situation that could have been a bit of a disaster and shut down your ability to do things and really bring down the room. And because of how you handled it, really, I think brought joy to a lot of people that day, which was pretty cool. Well, well, if you're listening on the podcast, you can't see that she just had a big yawn there. Let's close it off with the fact I love that you're writing articles. It's great to get a message out there. I think for you, it kind of helps process things. For me, frankly, it helps me to look at what you're writing and gives us something to talk about here. In the show notes, we'll post this on the LinkedIn link. And if we ever get a website, when are we going to get things together? We got to get serious.
You might say we're stuck.
Well, we're not fearful. I think we're lazy. That's what it is.
Definitely lazy.
Why are we lazy?
Just because we can be.
Well,
Summertime sadness.
Summertime sadness. I'm going to start writing songs. You write the articles. I'll write the songs.
How about I write the songs and you sing them?
Oh, that'd be perfect. Well, listen, guys, we appreciate you joining us. Steph, I appreciate you writing this article about fear. How would you close it off for these people about fear? How are you going to manage it?
With every dream, there's a fear that comes with it. If you want to achieve your dream, you're going to have to overcome your fear.
Oh, I love it. All right, guys, if you love what we're talking about, please hit the subscribe.